She said, "I'm making a pros and cons list about our relationship," then asked me to leave the room. I said, "Take your time." Then I made my own list. It had one word, the note she found when she finished her list. 34 male. Never thought I'd be writing something like this. But here we are. I've always been a measure twice, cut once kind of guy. My wife, let's call her Sarah, sat across from me. The silence wasn't peaceful. It was heavy, the kind that presses against your eardrums and makes the air feel thin. We've been married for 6 years, together for 8. But the last 6 months felt like I was living with a ghost who only manifested complaint about how I chew my food or how I breathe too loudly. She put her mug down on the granite island. It made a sharp clink that echoed in the room. She looked at a spot somewhere over my left shoulder, refusing to make eye contact. Then she dropped the bomb. She told me she couldn't do this right now. When I asked her what she meant, she waved her hand vaguely between us and said she needed clarity. She said she was making a pros and cons list about our relationship. She needed to see it on paper to know if I was viable. Viable, like I was a business merger or a potted plant, not her husband of 6 years. I felt a cold spike in my chest, but I kept my face blank. I asked her if she was serious about a list. She snapped at me, her eyes finally locking onto mine, cold and detached. She told me she couldn't do it with me, sitting there breathing down her neck. She told me to leave the room, go to the garage, go for a drive, just get out of her sight for an hour, so she could think. The entitlement in her voice wasn't new, but the volume was turned up to 11. She wasn't asking for space. She was dismissing a servant. This was the woman who, 3 weeks ago, demanded I fire my office manager because she sounded too pretty on the phone. I looked at her, then at the pristine notebook she had opened. She had her pen poised, ready to catalog my failures. I stood up. I didn't slam the chair. I walked out of the kitchen, down the hall, and into my home office. I closed the door and locked it. I didn't go to the garage. I sat at my desk and stared at my monitors. My heart was hammering. You don't make a pros and cons list unless the cons side is already heavy in your mind. You don't ask your husband to leave the room unless you're planning something you don't want him to see. I opened my laptop. 2 months ago, after she threw a wine glass at the wall near my head because I bought the wrong shade of white paint, I had installed a keylogger and mirroring software on the shared family iPad she used for everything. I told myself I was being paranoid at the time. I told myself I was crazy. I wasn't crazy. I pulled up the logs. It took me 3 minutes to find what I was looking for. It wasn't just a list she was making. She was live texting her mother. I watched the messages populate in real time. Sarah wrote to her mom that she had told me to leave the room and that I looked like a kicked puppy. Her mother replied immediately, telling her to keep the pressure on. She said the goal was a house and that if Sarah could get me to admit fault or leave voluntarily, they would have leverage. Then her mom asked if she had talked to Mark. Sarah replied that Mark said if she could provoke me into yelling or breaking something, she could get a restraining order. Then I'd be out and Mark could move in. She said she just needed me to snap, and that's what the list was for. She was going to read me every single thing she hated about me until I lost it. Her mom replied, calling her a smart girl, and reminded her to make sure the cameras were off. Mark, my blood, turned to absolute ice. Mark was her work husband, the guy she told me not to worry about, the guy who was just a friend going through a rough divorce who needed a shoulder to cry on. I sat there freezing, reading the history. It went back months. They had planned it all. The emotional distance, the picking fights, the gaslighting. It was a strategy, a campaign. They wanted a house, my house, the one I bought 3 years before we met, the one I poured my own sweat into renovating. They wanted me to pay alimony. They wanted me out so they could play house in the home I built. I felt a strange sense of calm wash over me. It was a calm of a demolition expert realizing the building is condemned. There's no point in fixing the cracks anymore. You just have to control the blast. I reached for a sticky notepad on my desk. She wanted a list? I would give her a list. I uncapped my Sharpie and wrote one single word. Then I picked up my phone. I didn't call my mom to cry. I called my lawyer. It was Saturday, but I pay him enough that he picks up. I told him it was happening. I told him to execute the termination clause on the lease immediately and to get the process server ready with the rush fee. Then I began to pack. Not a suitcase. I wasn't leaving for good. I was preparing for war. I moved with the silent efficiency of a thief in my own home. I went to the safe in the master closet and emptied it. Passports, birth certificates, the original deed, the cash reserves, my grandmother's jewelry. Sarah was still in the kitchen, probably updating Mark on her progress. I packed my electronics and moved the backup hard drives to my truck. I took photos of every room in the house, time-stamped, to prove the condition of the property. If she was planning to claim abuse or damage, I needed a baseline. I walked back into the office and printed 3 documents. One was a bank transfer receipt I found in the logs. One was a copy of the property title structure. One was a screenshot of her conversation with her mother from 10 minutes ago. I put the sticky note on top of the stack and walked out to the kitchen. She was sitting there, a smug look on her face. Her notebook was full. She had filled 3 pages. She told me she was done and that it was enlightening. She said there were a lot of cons. I walked over to the counter and poured the rest of the coffee down the sink. She asked if I was listening to her, getting annoyed that I wasn't begging for her approval. She said we needed to talk about the list. I turned to face her and told her we didn't need to talk. I said she asked me to leave the room so she could make a list, so I made one too. She rolled her eyes and asked if my list was about her nagging or spending money. I told her no, my list was much shorter. I slid the folded sticky note across the granite island. She looked at it, then at me, like I was wasting her time. She picked it up and unfolded it. She read the single word I had written in thick, black Sharpie, nullified. She looked up, confused, a nervous laugh bubbling out of her. She asked what the hell that meant, and if I was trying to be dramatic. I leaned forward, hands on the counter, and told her it meant she played her hand too early. Her mother, and Mark. The color drained from her face. So fast, she looked like a wax figure. She stammered that she didn't know what I was talking about. I told her I knew about the plan. I knew she wanted to provoke me. I knew she wanted the house. And I knew she wanted a restraining order. She stood up, her chair scraping loudly against the floor. The mask of the victim slammed into place instantly. She started screaming that I was delusional, that spying on her was abuse, and that she was calling the police because she felt unsafe. She reached for her phone. I told her to go ahead and call them, but before she did, she should know something about the house. She paused, her thumb hovering over the screen. I told her she thinks this is marital property. She thinks because she picked out the curtains and we lived here for 6 years, she owns half. I told her she thinks she can kick me out. She screamed that she will kick me out, that it's her home, and that Mark treats her like a queen. I told her Mark is going to have a hard time moving in here because I don't own this house personally. Her eyes narrowed. I told her the truth, or at least the legal truth. I bought this house 3 years before we met, before we got married, on the advice of my attorney. I transferred the property into an irrevocable trust for asset protection. I pay rent to that trust. The trust is the landlord. I am just a tenant. And since she is not a beneficiary of the trust, and she is not on the lease, because the trust has a strict no subletting and morality clause regarding unauthorized occupants, the lease is now void. I slapped the documents on the counter next to her list. I told her the trust just terminated my lease due to violation of the occupancy terms. We have both been evicted, effective immediately. She stared at the papers, trembling. She asked if I evicted myself. I corrected her. I terminated the tenancy, which means we have no legal right to be here. The property manager is on the way to change the locks. She started shrieking that I couldn't do that it was her house, and that I couldn't sell it to a trust without her permission. I reminded her that since I owned it prior to the marriage and never added her name to the deed because she said it was too much paperwork back then, it remained separate property. The trust structure was solid. I checked my watch and told her she had about 2 hours to pack what she could carry. Anything left behind would go into storage paid for by the trust, which she could access after the divorce settlement. She wasn't having it. She grabbed a heavy ceramic bowl from the counter, one of the expensive ones we bought in Italy, and hurled it at me. I didn't flinch. It shattered against the cabinet behind me, raining shards onto the floor. I pointed to the ceiling corner, where a tiny red light blinked. I told her that was going to look great in court. I had installed a new security system last week with audio and high-def video. She froze. The realization hit her like a freight train. She had just assaulted me on camera after I revealed I knew about her affair and the plot to frame me. She whispered for me to get out. I told her I was going, but someone else was here to see her first. The doorbell rang. The timing was impeccable. Sarah stood there, chest heaving, trapped between the shattered pottery and her own ruined plans. She looked at the front door, then back at me. Panic was setting in. The entitlement was cracking, revealing the desperate, greedy person underneath. She asked who it was. I told her to go answer it. She stomped to the door, probably hoping it was her mother coming to save her. She yanked the door open. A large man in a windbreaker stood there and asked for her by name. She hesitated but confirmed it. He said, "You've been served," thrust a thick envelope into her hands, and walked away. She stared at the packet. Petition for dissolution of marriage. She ripped it open. She didn't read the whole thing, just a summary. Her eyes scanned the pages, widening with every line. She screamed, asking why I was freezing the assets and suing her for spending money. I walked past her toward the door with my bag. I told her she spent $40,000 of our joint savings on consulting fees for a business that doesn't exist. I told her I traced the transfers. They went to an account linked to Mark's LLC. That's fraud. And in divorce court, that's called dissipation of assets. She owed me that money back. Half the equity she thought she had in the retirement accounts was gone to pay that debt. She grabbed my arm, digging her nails in. She screamed that I couldn't leave her with nothing, that she gave me her best years. I shook her off and told her she gave me a performance, and the show was canceled. She followed me onto the porch, shrieking that she would tell everyone I beat her, that she would tell everyone I was emotionally abusive. I stopped on the driveway. The neighbors were starting to look. Good. Witnesses. I told her to go ahead. Tell them. Then I'll play the video of her throwing the bowl at my head. I'll show the court the text where she planned to fake a panic attack to get me arrested. I'll post the transcripts where she called our friends losers and her own mother an annoying bank account. She stopped dead. Her social standing was the only thing she valued as much as money. She whispered that I wouldn't dare. I told her to try me. I said she wanted a list of pros and cons. So here's the reality. Pro, I'm free. Con, she is homeless, likely facing fraud charges if Mark doesn't pay that money back. And she is about to be very, very lonely. I got into my truck. She started crying for real this time, tears of terror. She begged me to wait, saying we could fix this, claiming she was confused and that Mark manipulated her. The speed at which she threw her soulmate under the bus was breathtaking. I told her Mark didn't make her write that list, and Mark didn't tell her to treat me like garbage for 6 months. I started the engine. She wailed, asking where she was supposed to go. I told her she said she needed space, so she had the whole house for about 90 minutes until the property manager arrived to secure the building. I backed out of the driveway. In the rearview mirror, I saw her collapse onto the lawn. It wasn't a cinematic fall. It was a slump of total defeat. I didn't feel happy. I didn't feel triumphant. I just felt light. The aftermath wasn't quick, but it was decisive. She tried to fight. She hired a shark of a lawyer who promised a moon, but facts are stubborn things. In the discovery phase, my lawyer presented the evidence. The business consulting payments to Mark were undeniable. Mark, it turned out, was already under investigation for tax evasion. When the IRS got wind of the transfers, courtesy of an anonymous tip my lawyer may or may not have facilitated, they froze his assets. He couldn't help her. He dumped her 2 weeks after I left. Because we live in a no-fault state, the infidelity didn't automatically strip her of everything, but the financial misconduct did. The judge was not amused by the attempt to hide assets or the text messages conspiring to file a false restraining order. The judge ruled that the $40,000 she funneled to Mark was an anticipatory distribution of her share of the marital assets. Basically, she had already spent her settlement. She got zero alimony. She got zero equity in the house because the trust structure held up, proving it was premarital property and never commingled. She got her car, which she couldn't afford the payments on, and her personal belongings. And the twist of the knife? The house. I moved back in 3 months later. The trust eviction was a tactical maneuver. My lawyer, acting as the trustee, had legally terminated the lease for both of us due to the hostile environment clause, the domestic violence caught on camera. This forced a legal separation of the household. Once the divorce was finalized and she had no claim to residency, the trust simply signed a new lease with me. Just me. It was a loophole, a beautiful, jagged loophole. She had to move back in with her mother, the same mother who had encouraged her to destroy me. Last I heard, they are making each other miserable. Her mom is charging her rent. I'm sitting in my kitchen now. It's quiet. The coffee is hot. I bought new bowls. I look at the counter where she made her list. I kept that notebook. I found it in the trash when I moved back in. Her cons for me were things like, does not want a vacation in Cabo every year, refuses to buy a Tesla, too nice to waiters. My one-word note was gone, but the message stuck. I realized something during the divorce. She didn't want a partner. She wanted a sponsor. She wanted a fan. And when I stopped clapping and started building a life she couldn't control, she tried to demolish me. But I'm a builder. I know how to reconstruct. And this time, I'm building a fortress where the only people allowed in are the ones who bring bricks, not wrecking balls.